But, dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, let me ask you a simple question. Do you believe in God? Do you believe that Jesus is the light of the world, born in the manger to dispel the darkness? How many of you dare to raise your hands and say, Father, I believe Jesus is the light of the world, has come into the world to dispel the darkness, while we all of us were perishing in the sin? I just remember a story about Viktor Frank. During the World War II, Viktor Frank was imprisoned in the NASA concentration camp, where he lost his parents, friends, relatives, his wife, and children. And he faced unimaginable physical and emotional sufferings in the NASA concentration camp, and his dignity was dehumanized. So, Viktor Frank, and along with him, there were fellow prisoners. Every day they had to dig in the freezing cold, not 1 or 2, 3 or 4 hours in a day, but 15 to 18 hours in a day they had to dig in the freezing cold. And such was the miserable situation of Frank and his fellow prisoners without proper food, clothes, and rest. Imagine the situation Viktor Frank had to undergo during those days in his NASA concentration camp. So, as he was realizing the meaning, why the suffering, why just people face the sufferings, and he wanted to find out the reason for all his sufferings. So, suddenly he became convinced that there was a reason, but which he couldn't understand properly, but he was sure there was a reason for all his sufferings. So, he writes a famous book. In his famous book, Man Searches for Meaning, he wrote, while he was in the camp, while he was digging in the freezing cold, one day he saw a light from a far distance, lighting brightly and shining brightly. At that moment, when he discovered this light, he remembered a beautiful gospel passage from the Gospel of John. The light shines in the darkness. From that moment onwards, my dear brothers and sisters, he became a different person. And that particular passage gave him hope, confidence in the midst of his trials, sufferings, persecutions. And that particular gospel passage dispelled the darkness from that moment onwards in his life. But dear friends, there are times, like Viktor Frank, we all of us are thrown into the darkness of sin. In the spiritual darkness, there is a spiritual darkness in our families, communities, in our spiritual lives. We are thrown into the darkness. Let us open ourselves to Christ so that Christ will dispel the darkness in our lives. When we try to hide our iniquities, when we do something wrong, remember, my dear friends, our deeds are in the darkness. But the light of Christ born in the manger today will reveal all our secret intentions and deeds. The Gospel of Luke chapter 8, we hear, there is nothing secret. There is nothing is hidden. Everything is revealed to the naked eye of God. When we do not know what to do, what to speak, do you know, our minds are in the darkness. But the light of Christ born in the manger will remove the ignorance. When we do not find the meaning and purpose in our lives, our life is in darkness. But the light of Christ born in the manger will help us to understand the meaning and the purpose of our lives. While Viktor Frank couldn't find the reason and meaning and the purpose of his life, but that you see that towards the end of the story, that particular gospel passage, when he remembered and when he recalled the light shines in the darkness, that particular gospel passage gave him a meaning and purpose in his life, gave him hope and confidence to live in the midst of challenges and trials and persecutions. My dear friends, let us examine ourselves as we are celebrating the nativity of our Lord Jesus, the birthday of our Lord Jesus, Christmas celebration. Is there darkness in our personal lives? Certainly, we must say, yes, there is a darkness. There are so many darknesses in our lives. When there is no place for love, there is a darkness we experience in our day-to-day life. When there is no place for forgiveness, sharing, and caring, we experience the darkness in our day-to-day lives. There is a darkness in our personal lives. There is a darkness in our personal, interpersonal relationship with God. There is a darkness in our communities, in our families, in our societies. Today, the child Jesus is born in the manger. Let us surrender ourselves to that light so that the darkness will be removed and dispelled from our lives. And we will become the children of light, not the children of darkness.